Good afternoon and welcome to Columbus Metropolitan Club. Today's forum is sponsored by the Columbus Foundation and PNC. Our live stream is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. My name is Tony Bell, and I'd like to welcome you all here and thank you for support of today's forum. And for today's forum, our forum is titled Pioneering Nonprofit Black Girl Rising in Steering Black Girls in Ohio from ages 11 to 18 to Success through Research, Advocacy, Community-Based Work, and Inclusive and Honest Conversation. Today, we are excited to learn about this groundbreaking initiative from our expert panel. To introduce our speakers on behalf of today's sponsor, PNC, please welcome to the stage Mary Auk, PNC Regional President for Columbus. Mary, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Tony. It's so great to see so many of you in person, and a special welcome to our guests on YouTube, especially those students from Otterbein that were mentioned earlier. On behalf of the Columbus Foundation and the Central Ohio employees of PNC Bank, some of whom are here with us today, we welcome you to today's CMC Luncheon. The forum focuses on a topic that has long been ignored in our community. One of today's speakers, right here, Fran Frazier, had the strength and courage to address how Central Ohio's Black girls are coping with traumatic events, including senseless acts of violence, the pandemic, as well as many other social issues. It's difficult, if not impossible, for many of us, myself included, to truly understand the anxiety and fear that these experiences have created for African Americans and other people of color, including many of our own PNC employees, our customers, their family members, etc. PNC remains committed to helping our communities be more equitable places where everyone feels welcomed, valued, and respected. I'm fortunate to work for a company that not only cares about the places where we live and work, but also champions a culture where employees feel confident presenting their ideas and are valued for their individual abilities. In 2020, PNC made a commitment to help address systemic racism and support the economic empowerment of Black and low and moderate income individuals and communities. This commitment, totaling more than $1 billion, will be executed through our community development banking team, which works locally to boost the quality of life in our low and moderate income neighborhoods. Locally, as an example, Zora's House received a $100,000 grant from PNC over 2 years to provide training and technical assistance for 80 women of color, artisans, and entrepreneurs. That's just one example of how we're going to market with this initiative. In addition, this past year, PNC launched Project 257, Accelerating Women's Financial Equality, to help close the economic gender gap and expand on PNC's decade-long commitment of supporting financial decision makers that are female. Project 257 takes its name from a 2020 report by the World Economic Forum that highlighted the fact, believe it or not, that at the current pace it would take 257 years for women to achieve financial parity with men around the world. One of the drivers of this economic gender gap is unequal access to credit. So to help address this issue, PNC has formed a partnership with SheEO, a global nonprofit that provides zero-interest loans and an ecosystem of support to women and non-binary entrepreneurs. PNC is contributing $1.257 million over 3 years to SheEO, working with the organization to drive awareness and help increase the number of investors who support SheEO businesses. SheEO shares our unwavering commitment to diversity. In fact, all 5 businesses who received SheEO loans in the U.S. last year were owned by Black and brown entrepreneurs. As a Main Street bank, PNC has a commitment to leveraging our differences as assets. It's also why we support Black Girl Rising's vision to ensure African American girls are empowered to live lives of authenticity, equality, and resiliency. Together, we can accelerate women's financial equality. And now, please help me welcome today's speakers. Fran Frazier, Principal Investigator of Black Girl Rising. Aliya Horton, a charter member of the Rise Sister Rise Black Girl Think Tank and third-year pre-law student at The Ohio State University. And Dr. Camille R. Quinn, assistant professor with the College of Social Work at The Ohio State University. And of course, our host, who is Tonisha Johnson, anchor and reporter with Spectrum News 1 Ohio. You can learn more about your speakers in your forum flyer today. Tonisha, we look forward to the conversation. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here today. Let's see here. All righty. So again, thank you all so much, even for being here today, and even those of you who are online. It is certainly a pleasure to have this discussion today. Grateful for the opportunity to be able to moderate the discussion, and it's really centered on the work of Black Girl Rising and what's happening beyond that. And so, as you've already heard about a little bit of the work, but I want to share just a little bit more. And so Black Girl Rising, they've been in existence for over a decade. This particular nonprofit is focused on placing Black girls at promise. BGR's work is really focused on as well, making sure that no matter the economic status of Black girls, that they have the opportunity to live authentic lives, to live resilient lives. And this includes working to improve their overall quality of life, along with their families' lives. This includes helping them to find permission for their voice to be heard while using their platform to shine. This includes helping them to be the best version of themselves. All of this and so much more is what BGR is focused on, and when we talk about placing Black girls at promise. And so we're going to get more into that and what that really means in just a little bit here, but just to give you some context, there are over 200,000 Black girls living right here in Ohio. And while not everyone has the same story or the same circumstances, there are a great number who have been exposed to a lot of traumatic events over their lifetime, and more so than any other young girls their age. And with that being said, I want to take a look today. We all want to take a look today, not just here on this panel, but even those of us sitting in the audience and even on live stream. We want to take a look at the challenges that they face, the disparities, also looking at the data and what it says across the state too. We also want to look at how can we help them to thrive in spite of those challenges that they face so that they can be the resilient women that are making good choices. Now, I know oftentimes we can zero in on the data first and let's look at all the issues that are going on, but I want to start with something different first. I want to start the conversation off with what are the strengths? What are the things that Black girls bring to the table when we start to think about them? And anybody can jump in with this as we start the conversation today, but what do adult Black women, young Black women bring to the table?
I can go first. Hello, everyone. To be honest, we bring everything. No questions added to it, but to be more specific, we bring authenticity, we bring diversity, we bring creativity, we bring our experiences. And a lot of times when you're a Black girl, Black woman, they put and categorize you into one box of what they know or what they see you as from stereotypical or things that they see on television or what they hear. But Black women and Black girls bring everything to the table. Anything that you're looking for, any experience that you need, anything that you want, anything that you're searching can be found in a Black woman or a Black girl because we are everything.
Well, we certainly are. I think two things, especially that Black girls bring to the table. One is their tenacity. The other is, I could say their swag, but I think it has to do with a poem by Dr. Maya Angelou. I don't know whether you're familiar with this poem, but it's called "And Still I Rise." And she talks about a woman who walks like she has oil wells in her living room. Given the opportunity, Black girls walk that way. We don't always appreciate that walk because a lot of us don't always understand that walk. But it's an incredible way to survive systemic racism. It's an incredible way to survive how people look at you. And it's a wonderful way to survive when you're not sure about your own self or your own color or your own body or what it is that you actually can offer. And it's not fake it till you make it. It's, I actually believe I have this. I just need the opportunity to show it. And the opportunity for people to believe in it. So our girls bring a lot to the table. And we're hoping today that when you see a Black girl anywhere, that it will not be because of some deficit that immediately comes to mind, but the fact that she very well could have oil wells in her living room.
I think the only thing that I would add is that Black girls bring to the table what I would call fortitude. So we will talk about some of the challenges or difficulties that Black girls have experienced, but in spite of those things, despite those things, there's a remarkable fortitude, a desire to be the best, to strive and excel in spite of those things. And so that is part of what being at Promise looks like for Black girls, and that's what they bring.
And so as they've each mentioned their own respective thoughts about what it means and the strengths of Black young girls, I want us to now think about, hold those thoughts in your mind, but then I want us to now start to look at the data. We want to understand what Black girls are really up against. I want to start off by now saying, okay, well, yes, we have those positive things, but girls ages 11 to 18 deal with a lot, just in general, right? But Black girls especially. And so when we start to look at what is prohibiting their strengths from always coming forward, this is what we want to dig into. So Ms. Frazier, I want to start with you. And so you, along with several other partners, had the opportunity to launch out and really discover, with over 400 girls here in Ohio, specifically in Dayton, Akron, Columbus, and the Lima areas, what Black girls were dealing with through a study. So I want you to talk about what led to this study, but then also why those specific areas in Ohio, and also what did you find? Because I even just myself looking at it and the data was like, oh, okay.
Well, let's see. Probably for the past 10 years, this was probably in 2006, I had been working with school systems around the country, looking at Black girl aggression. I'm sure all of you remember all the stories, all the news clippings about Black girl fights. And principals were wondering, what exactly is going on? It seemed to be a national phenomenon. So I had been working with school administrators, teachers, parents, and the girls themselves with a modicum of success, actually. And one day I got a call from Leslie Brower, who was with the Ohio Department of Mental Health, and she said, you know, we got a little bit of money, because there's always a little bit of money. Although after what I heard from PNC, I will be calling. So she said, we have a little bit of money, and we want to look at mental health in the Black community, and we're having a rough time. So I said, I would love to take a look at what's going on with Black girls. I'm seeing a lot of anger, I'm seeing a lot of sadness, I'm seeing a lot of depression, and I need to know where this is coming from. So we went back and forth. Well, you can't just look at black girls, you need to look at white girls, you need to look at Latina girls. And I said, well, you know, I didn't have the money before, I don't need it now, because I unapologetically want to look at black girls. So we went round and round, and then we agreed that that's what we would do. The director at that time wanted us to look at metropolitan cities, but also a small city that had a large black population, which is how we looked at Lima. And then I had the grace to actually have the resources of the entire research department of the State Department of Mental Health. I don't have a Ph.D. All of them have Ph.D.s. And I think what made me feel so empowered to share my thinking about what we needed to look at with black girls is that this team of researchers and analysts and statisticians listened. They actually listened and said, you have the expertise because you're out there. We'll help you get to where you want to go. And Dr. Laura Belliston-Cobb is in this room. And I can tell you, if it was not for her, where are you, Laura? I'm not sure we would have been as successful. We looked at how black girls live their lives. What is it like to be a black girl in an urban city or in an urban setting? So we know that for many of our girls, poverty is an issue, but not for all of our girls. And that's why I was saying it's important that when you look at a black girl, that it not be from a deficit. Our range of girls from 11 to 18 were girls who lived in two-parent black upper middle class families to girls who did not. Because one of the things that's so important is that we have to look at the face of black girls in any city and not just a targeted group of black girls and assume we already know what's going on with them, because we don't. If you are black and middle class, you have some of the same issues that girls in other schools do. And girls will say, you know, the biggest issue is being smart in white spaces. That's what they call it, white spaces. Because they don't always like you to be smart. They don't always like you to have voice. So we wanted to see what girl life was like. We started out with focus groups and literally asked them, what is girl life like in your neighborhood? Some of the girls talked about what it's like in the summertime when you don't wear sweaters and pants and coats, and you get off a school bus, and there's a whole crowd of men who are sexualizing you as you get off the bus. And then we had girls whose parents make $300,000-$400,000, but they're never home because they're working all the time. And so they happen to be in houses by themselves, big houses, but by themselves. So we wanted to get an idea of what life is really like. We asked them all kinds of questions. Actually, I think our survey had over 500 items on it. We wanted to know about their developmental assets. We gave them the ACEs survey. We looked at violence in their communities. We looked at what they ate, how they slept, what their behavioral and emotional functioning was. So we looked at strength, we looked at lots of strength factors, and we looked at risk factors as well. I would love for you to go to our website, blackgirlrising.net. You can download any of the studies. You can also download the 118-page full study if you want to. Or you can look at what we did in each city. One of the things that, how do we get our girls? We did not go through the school system because I did not want principals telling me that we couldn't survey just black girls. So I know women in at least 18 cities in this state. Really. And so I called them up and said, I'm getting ready to do this research. I need for you to get girls. I wanted 150 girls in every city, and Laura kept saying, that's a lot. But we did pretty good. We had 101 girls to take the survey in Columbus, 74 in Lima, 126 in Akron, and 10 in Dayton. And it was all self-report. I think the biggest thing we did was to make sure that they got breaks. And we fed them a lot of sweet things in the morning, a lot of donuts, a lot of Sunny D, so that they would be perky for this survey.
Let me pause you for just a second. Because even as you started touching on some of the things that were found in this study, I think a couple of things that caught my attention were the number of girls, nearly 60%, who had seen some sort of violence taken place in their life. At least half had experienced or had been threatened with violence themselves. Then you look at the numbers that experienced emotional abuse, that experienced neglect. You look at 30% whose mothers had been battered, and the list goes on. And for some of these things, it caught me by surprise, and I'll just ask this to anybody that's on the panel, was this surprising just in hearing these kinds of things, even girls that maybe, Aliya, you connected with, I don't know, but was this, you're shaking your head, and tell me why.
So I've been with Sister Fran since I was like in 8th grade. And now I'm like, I'm not gonna say my age, but I'm getting older. So let's just say that. I'm in college now, I should say. So when this was taking place, you said 2006, I was 5. So when I joined Black Girl Rising, everything that was researched was true to us. So like when we first started, we had girls from Upper Arlington, girls from Columbus City Schools, girls from Lincoln Heights, and we all had the same common experiences. So for me, it wasn't really anything surprising because it was something that I live every day or experiences that I can connect to because we all had similar experiences with each other. So I would say no, it's for me. Yeah.
And Dr. Quinn, you've been able to do some of your own research even outside of this. So I'm just curious, I'm gonna ask her to talk about terminology because she helped me. So she's gonna help all of us today. But I want her to talk about not only her research, but her findings, because she didn't just do this by herself, but she did it with other people as well. And specifically with, I say juvenile justice involvement, tell me if I'm wrong. She will correct me in just a moment, it's okay. But dealing with that issue, along with all these other things that we are seeing that Black girls are experiencing. So if you would just talk about that, the trauma, the PTSD that Black girls experience, and yes, what do we do with all of that?
Absolutely. So first, I would like to contextualize this a little bit. I grew up in a large urban city myself. I experienced many of the things that I later found as a researcher were named. From Good to Ghetto, a book by Dr. Nikki Jones, where she talked about young black girls growing up in South Philly and the experiences that they had trying to protect themselves. Woo, Philly. I'm from Chicago. No love, no shade. But the point of what I want to stress here is that there is a level of consistency across the board with regard to what girls experience. My work in particular focuses on an indicated population who are either girls who are already involved with or at risk of involvement with what I term the youth punishment system. And the reason why I use that language is because terms like juvenile offender, quote unquote, or the juvenile justice system, quote unquote, are promoting stereotypes and they stigmatize the population. Sister Fran mentioned that many of the young girls she spoke to, in fact, across schools, a lot of times they may experience disciplinary actions in school. Some of them may result, and many of them unfortunately result in arrest. And so when those girls leave those schools and they come back and they're identified as an offender, that is stigmatizing. Teachers see them that way. A few years ago, I was a presenter and a facilitator for a biennial session with judges and probation officers in the state of Illinois. And one of the points that came up in the discussion that we talked about with young girls and boys as well, who are multi-system involved. So they may be involved with special education. They may be involved with the child welfare system as well as the youth punishment system. If those young people had an IEP or an individual education plan, they were targeted by school resource officers just because of that. So there is a need for all of us to understand what is really promised when we're talking about young black girls. The data is real. In the last 40 years, arrest rates of young people have dropped to their lowest in 40 years, with the exception of girls, and in particular, black girls, who continue to be overrepresented in the youth punishment system. So clearly, there's a perception that I think promise can break and say, wait a minute, let's look at this differently. Let's think about this data differently. In one of the studies that I conducted with some of my colleagues around the country, we looked at a sample of girls in a southern jurisdiction. They were all in detention, African-American girls, and although they identified future orientation, meaning I have a view of what I want my future to look like, I believe that I will be successful, and that they had high self-esteem, they still endorsed very high rates of post-traumatic stress disorder. So what does that mean? That means that we as providers, we as allies to girls, we as teachers, we as family members, as friends, have to think about what is it that they need from their point of view. That is one of the reasons why I was so excited to be aligned with Fran Frazier, as well as Aliya Horton, because the work that they've been doing with Black Girl Rising is exactly aligned with the view that I have of my work, which is centered around their strengths, their protective factors, understanding the things that promote their well-being and their health. And so I think that's the space where we have to really start.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say that the theme today is placing Black girls at promise. In 2008, the American Psychological Association had a task force on strength and resilience of Black children and adolescents. And one of the things that they said was that our children needed to be, for optimal youth development, really needed to be owned by caring adults, teachers, mentors, community leaders, whoever those caring adults are around them. That would be the only way that they could be placed at promise. And I'm sure many of you know the work of Dr. Bruce Perry. Dr. Perry said, children have to have relational wealth to get through their trauma so that they can have a sense of what Dr. Quinn talked about, hope for the future. But when children are in relational poverty, then they tend to stay in that trauma. And we get to see the behaviors that stem from the trauma. And then we end up having to deal with that. So our work about placing Black girls at promise is really about collective work and responsibility. It's a African value system term that means that when we're doing our best and we do our best together, it helps all of us. So Ujima, the term means we are in this together. We can build and maintain our community by looking at my sisters' and brothers' problems as long as we can solve them together. So we place our girls at promise by bringing in all the resources that we can, surrounding them with those resources, which then allows them to build the strength they need, the confidence they need, and the voice. Because one of the things that we think is really important is that Black girls have to have a voice, and they have to use that voice, and they have to be comfortable with that voice, because that voice gives them the energy to be about whatever it is that's important to them. So placing Black girls at promise is the way to do that, we think.
And Aliya, just to tag off of that, just kind of talk about your experience, even in the think tank, and finding your voice and kind of how you were helped in finding yours.
So this is funny, like, it's ironic. The first time I ever spoke in a public space was in this building. So, like, and I didn't know what I was doing. Sister Fran was like, get up there and speak. And I was like, you think I'm ready? And I was really young, so I never had like an opportunity. Like, I knew how to talk. I knew how, I was well prepared. I knew how to speak. I knew how to sit, the whole 9 yards. But being able to do that, it was very it wasn't overwhelming. It was a lot. And I was surprised that someone actually believed in me and who I was. So a little bit when I was a sophomore in high school, Sister Fran told me, like, you have to come down here, we have some exciting news for you. And I was like, okay, what are we doing? She said, you all have been invited to go to the White House under Obama. This was under the Obama administration. And we're like, what? I was invited to the White House? Oh my gosh. And one thing about Sister Fran and the Black Girl Rising team, they follow through. If they tell you they're going to do something, they do something. They called every woman that they knew. They called the team. We didn't have to pay for anything. We didn't have to pay for any meals. Everything was taken care of. If I did not have that experience where I went to Washington, D.C., and we sat down and we talked to college interns and college graduates who went to Howard who were working for Michelle Obama and telling us their experiences and what they went through and how they lived, it was so surreal because I was looking at myself essentially. And then the night got better when we went to Congresswoman Joyce Beatty's office, and I had chills in my bones because I told myself, and it told me I need to be here. I deserve to be here. And having someone and having so many women, having the community support me and making sure that I succeed was a lot. And even having Congresswoman Joyce Beatty come up to us like she knew us, like she was our aunt, and she was telling us, like, I'm so excited to see y'all. What's your name? How are you? What are your dreams? What are your goals? And we're like, oh my gosh, we're really here. Then she took us to Nancy Pelosi's office, and we're like, oh my gosh, we're in Nancy Pelosi's office. Like, we're at the president's training, everything. We had a great night. But in that sense, like, it was a great experience, but what if I didn't have that experience? What if I didn't see myself at the table? I wouldn't be where I am today. She always expects greatness out of us. She always said, you're not wearing jeans when you go somewhere. You cross your legs. You make sure that the photo of the napkin is towards you. You speak slow, like the whole 9 yards. But she made sure that we were like that. We would go out of town, because we did a lot of things, and we had a lot of other community forums that we would speak at out of town. And we would look at other girls and be like, y'all allowed to wear that? Y'all allowed to speak like that? Y'all talk to y'all mentors like that? Because Sister Fran would never. Black Girl Rising would never, and we knew how to be great girls. And out of that, I have so many great opportunities where I met so many great people because of them. And having this is really placing Black girls. Our problem is they really kept the consistency. If you don't have consistency, it would not be here. Like, we had monthly meetings that were at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and we had to be there at 9 a.m. And sometimes we would stay until 1 o'clock, but it wasn't like I was forced to go. I was willing to go. We were like, oh, why don't we have meetings every week? Like, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. You would speak, so like, for example, I was talking to Sister Fran. I was talking to one of my sisters. I wasn't really talking to anybody. And I was like, I don't really like the way guys are and how they talk to Black girls and how we interact with each other. And then Sister Fran was like, so what are we gonna do about it? And I said, oh, what are we going to do about it? So we make community forums, and then we have Get Woke with us, where we have Black boys and Black girls have community conversations on how we talk to each other and how we respect each other. But that's because she listened to me. It wasn't because she was just like, okay, they're going to do what they are. They're 12, they're 13. No, she took our considerations. She loved us. She was consistent. And the whole team who's all over there, I'm gonna give y'all a shout out because I love y'all too, who've been with me since I was in 8th grade. Has been consistent, and they're still consistent to this day as you see them now. So.
And she's also had an opportunity to continue paying that forward with other young girls. So I'm super proud of what you've been able to accomplish already, even at your age. We are at a point, this time has gone by very, very fast, but we're going to move to questions in just a little bit here. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask panelists, even if you're on live stream, go ahead and get those questions together. And if you're here in the room, you can prepare those questions and then come to the mic. We are going to do one last question, and then we'll get to audience questions. So last question is this. You know, we've talked a lot about, you know, placing Black girls at promise. What are the challenges? But then also, what are the strengths? And how can people support? But I want to dig a little bit more into that in terms of what are now the tangible calls, because one of the things that was repeated, and I want to say it again, is that this is not just a BGR item on their agenda to do or just their focus, but this has to be a community effort and an effort with the community at large across this state. So much to the point I said to Ms. Frazier that I see BGR as a midwife, but it doesn't just have to be BGR that's a midwife, but that we all as community members can be midwives to help place Black girls at promise, to help push their purpose forward, to help them find their voice, and so on. And so with that being said, tangible calls really quickly for adults, for young people, anybody.
Sure. Well, my first thing when that comes to mind is decolonizing how you think. So when I say that is a lot of you all are very important people, and y'all have a lot of money that y'all give to other foundations. But before you give money to those foundations, before you think that you're helping somebody and having white savior syndrome, as it usually is called, or giving, I've seen a lot of times, even in the Columbus community with a lot of companies, where their best interest isn't for Black people or for Black girls, where their best interest is what they think is their best interest. And so decolonizing your mind and really understanding what you're doing, really understanding what you're funding, really understanding what's going on, because you're not going to understand a Black girl's experience because you've never been a Black girl. And if you are a Black woman, you understand your experience because your experience is unique to you. But having that, but not thinking to yourself, oh, I think this will be great for them. I think this will be good for them. Listening, understanding, instead of being so quick to talk, so being so quick to say, well, this is what we do. And you know, when we had this organization, they were similar to you all. No, listen, take in, actually try to understand before being quick to trying to colonize what you want or a program that you see.
That's it for me. I would really like to see more policy that affects us. I would like to see, I think this community funds a lot of girl initiatives, but what we don't see is the policy that's changing what we need to change. And I think that's what's critical. This is a resource-rich community. But I think we need to find ways of taking the work that we really need to happen and fund it over time. Because otherwise, the work that's being done is based on what the grant is for this year, what the theme is for this year, and not what can we do over time. Now, I have to give a shout out to the Adam Board of Franklin County, because they have been consistent with us and have allowed us to continue to move the work in a very consistent way. We are not having to jump through hoops over themes, but what we've been able to do is to stick with, so we've got girls who've been with us 5 years, and we've been able to help them grow in lots of different ways, and it has allowed us to grow as well. And we're starting to see some policy change. So I think from advocacy to policy is so important.
I would just end and say that I think we need to curate new language. I like this phrase, I see from where I be from, which is where I speak from. So if we use language that is truly authentic, the term Black girl magic is real, then that is how we think about Black girls at Promise. See them as they are, not just their circumstances, and then catalyze in your mind what it is I can do to push them closer to Promise.
All right, so with that being said, it's the longstanding tradition of CMC to take audience questions at this particular point. Jane Scott with CMC is going to be curating those questions, and at this time, if you've got a question, go ahead and go to the microphone. Those in live stream, she's already got those ready. Jane Scott, go ahead.
All right. Pardon me. I do have some questions from our live stream audience, but as Tonisha said, please come up and line up behind me, and we'll do every other one. So Kathy Fox asked, in light of the data about black girls being overrepresented in the juvenile punishment system, what are the panelists' suggestions for changes in school board, schools, police, et cetera? So in other words, a question that you were just talking about in terms of policy, can you be a bit more specific? What policies? Are there some specific wish list things?
Actually, go right ahead.
I have a specific one. We can look right within our state. Lucas County took current dollars that had already been allotted for programming. They were school resource officer dollars. They moved them toward an assessment center within that same setting, and they saw a dramatic decrease of 98% of girls, youth being arrested. So if we have existing dollars that have already been allocated, we can move them to other line items where young people can actually benefit. Since we know that the school to prison pipeline is real and is in effect, and we see that in schools across the country and across our own state, we can do that right here, right now. We can get budget officers, we can get principals in a room to talk about it. Right now, there's been a moratorium on school resource officers in Columbus City Schools, that's a step in the right direction. But then where's the dollar gonna come from? There are existing dollars that can be used, and providing case management services that can actually identify needs that students have, particularly Black girls, is a specific way you can do that.
A really great example in Lima, after we conducted the research, we went back to every city and said, here's what the girls in your city are dealing with. In Lima, the Allen County Children's Services, the juvenile court system, and the Adam Board there decided that they wanted to do something. I had been really pushing this idea that one of the ways to get our girls to regulate themselves would be through yoga, meditation, mindfulness, deep breathing. They hired a woman, and every girl who comes through their system has to take that course. I mean, there are things that literally are easy to do if we think about who it is that we want to do it for.
Yeah, I was just going to say, with that, what they both said was research. You can't say a specific policy unless you have the research of what the problem and the issue is. You can't assume that that's the issue when really it might not be the issue. So in order to understand the policies that need to be done, it needs to be research implemented of what's the need.
I just want to follow that and say that the research is critical, but it has to be community-engaged research. So that means that we're actually partnering, Ohio State is partnering with Black Girl Rising. Ohio State is partnering with the City Council and the Franklin County Juvenile Court to engage in community-engaged research. So that it's not just what the researchers are interested in learning, it's what the participants are telling us. A study that I'm launching right now based on a partnership with Franklin County Juvenile Court and the City Council, City Council member Priscilla Tyson, who recently retired, is really to do just that, a pilot study to start with girls who are referred from Franklin County Juvenile Court, as well as their parents and caregivers, to talk to them about their experiences. What has it been like when you've been referred, if you've ever been referred for services, and then use that feedback to actually tailor a stress reduction intervention that's centered around healing. Because we know that trauma is an issue, but we want to focus on how they heal and then give them the opportunity to participate in that intervention and give us feedback again. So I think I agree 100%. The policies need to be there, but the research needs to be engaged and it needs to be informed directly by the people who will be affected by it.
So this is a question from one of our new Otterbein students, Elijah McCutcheon. Is there a role that higher education plays in this big picture of putting Black women and girls in the best position to succeed?
Sure. Yes. Yes, it does. Short answer, yes. So a little bit about me. I go to The Ohio State University. I'm a double major in political science and philosophy on the pre-law track. When I first got to Ohio State, I had imposter syndrome. I was a straight-A student in high school. And when I got to Ohio State and was in a room full of 200 white kids, and I was the only Black girl, and I have to defend policies that affect Black people, and everyone's looking at you to answer, and you have imposter syndrome, it is very much a thing. I know for me and my friends, a lot of them wanted to drop out our first semester because we had no one to teach us and no one to guide us through our way of getting to college, because college is a whole another issue and separate things. You learn how to live by yourself. For me, being at a predominantly Black school, I had 3 white roommates, having to explain why my hair shrinks, having to explain why I'm not getting as the best grades that I can because I went to a school that was underperforming and I didn't have to do anything to make A's, where I go to school now where we have to read 20-page essays about the 1400s and we don't even understand what we're learning, and having to do that for each class for 5 classes and having to do that, it puts us in a position where we don't know what to do, but we know we have each other in a sense. But also when we're all going through the same thing, we're just trying to stick it out. And higher education really can make or break you, because we know, like, if we leave and we don't get this education, we have nothing to go back to. Where my white roommates, who their parents worked at the top firm that there is, and they had all the resources handed to them, had no worries. They didn't have to go to work to provide for themselves. They could focus on school. They had their parents' credit card, where I had to go to work even when I was sick because I had no one to give me money to take care of myself or to buy essential things. So having that, and even just going into like Ohio State and going to college, like, we don't have any programs that teach you how to live and how to study and how to understand the texts that you're reading, and being able to have that mindset to keep going, because you know, if I drop out, if this doesn't work for me, then what am I going to do? What is the next step? How is that going to play a part of what my role in society is? Because literally, if I don't have this education, I'm nothing. And that's how we thought of it. But we learned, that's not true. Like, that's not, I don't want y'all to think, oh, that's what, no, I don't think that at all. But as like when you go into it, it's very much an intimidating situation. So
I would just say too, as a professor at The Ohio State University, I embrace students like Aliya. I mean, Aliya is what we would call a top shelf student, but even if she weren't, I would embrace the opportunity to get to know her. I have students that are in this room. I continue to interact with former students, and I'm typically sought out for that reason by students on campus. And so I think part of it is translating what I do outside of the classroom, the research that I do, in a way that is meaningful to students. Aliya is working with me on an advocacy effort looking at bind-over law here in the state of Ohio, which is basically an automatic transfer law that makes the decision with some judicial oversight that young people under the age of 18 can be automatically sent to prison depending on the crime that they commit. And so we are curating a group of advocates who want to abolish this law and have been working directly with the public defender's office to do this. And so I think giving students like Aliya and others who may not be in the same space as she's in the opportunity to learn outside of the classroom, to engage faculty in meaningful ways, to have off-site conversations just about life, to be present is really some of the best ways that I think that we can put girls, Black girls particularly, at promise, and continue to meet their needs, but also to seek and hear what they need and respond to that.
This question is from Charity Martin King. How do you respond to people who are critical of race and gender specific programs and funding streams?
Final question.
I just say, get into it, because it's not going anywhere. I get it, it's difficult, it may be uncomfortable, but I think having conversations that are honest and real and helping people think that though there are differences, there are also similarities that we can build upon, and that our own understanding of ourselves will lend itself to that.
I think that to live in America and not be conscious of race and culture and ethnicity is to be blind. It is important to have gender-specific funding, programs, conversations, collaborations, as well as not just race, because we already know that's a social construct, but to look at how do we figure out how to actually be together, work together, and it's really what we do with our girls in our think tank. How do you think critically? How do you communicate across barriers? And how do you build community? So that's the real answer. And I think when we think that there's something wrong with gender and race-specific issues or funding, then I think we're only looking at one group and not all of us.
This has been a really good conversation today, and we are going to wrap it up because we are out of time, and we wish we had more time. But I'm going to turn it back over now to Tony Bell for concluding remarks.
Wow. I certainly do hope that you found today's forum promising and engaging, and that you can see yourself as an active ally, advocate, and supporter, because we are all better together. Please make plans to join us next week as CMC presents The Future of Work, The Office of Tomorrow, featuring a panel of experts. Thank you to our online virtual seat patrons and to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. Thank you to today's sponsors, the Columbus Foundation and PNC. And our special appreciation to today's speakers. Another warm round of applause for Fran Frazier, Camille Quinn, Aliya Horton, and our host, Tonisha Johnson. Thank you. Thank you to each of you. We couldn't do this without you, so we look forward to seeing you next week at the Columbus Metropolitan Club as we present another community conversation. Thank you.